Okay, thanks everyone for joining us. We're going to be starting shortly. Okay, thanks everyone for joining us. We're going to be starting shortly.
We're on YouTube.
We're on YouTube? Okay. Should we get started, Katie?
Go for it. Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, so welcome everyone. My name is Valerie Menastra. I'm a principal planner at Nelson Pope and Voorhees, and I'm here this evening to provide you an update on the town's comprehensive plan, as well as go through the comprehensive plan itself and the proposed zoning changes, as well as next steps. I'm also here tonight with Danielle Dreyer, who's a planning analyst at Nelson Pope and Voorhees. She's going to be assisting us during the Q&A portion. So, because we'd like to be able to provide information directly on where people can go into the comprehensive plan or potential zoning to get additional information and to help answer your questions. I'm also joined by Kirsten Conrad. So she's going to be helping to basically help with the movement of the meeting tonight. If anybody has any questions or would like to speak tonight, there is a sign-up sheet for people in this room, but we also have attendees online as well. And so Katie McGinn, who is the chair of the Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee, she will also be assisting us too in the actual meeting itself, and she will be helping with the people online. So let me just give you a little background of how we're going to run the meeting this evening. So first of all, anybody that's online, if you can possibly make sure you rename your Zoom name to your full name, so that way Kirsten and Katie can address you appropriately. Also, I'm going to give a presentation. We're going to hold all questions and answers until the end of the presentation. And then after that, we're happy to go back to anywhere in the presentation. And then we'll also talk a little bit more about the comprehensive plan and any details you have questions on. All right. With that, well, let's begin. So again, we're here tonight to talk about the town of Lewisboro's comprehensive plan. So Katie, why don't you go to the next slide? So I'm going to talk a little bit about a comprehensive plan. I understand that some of the text might be a little difficult for people to read in the back of the room. So I'm just going to read that to you, and then we'll continue going through that way for any of the information that seems, I think, a little bit hard for you to read. So first of all, a comprehensive plan is basically a document that describes a vision for a community's future and the goals and objectives that through actions taken by the town board or other agencies support that vision. It reflects consensus that is achieved through public input and contains the land use, environmental, and related policies that will guide the town board and its agencies in their actions until the plan is reviewed again. It's a living document, and it's a document by the people for the current and future betterment of those who live and work in the community. The comprehensive plan is also authorized by New York State town law. Once a town adopts the comprehensive plan, all town land use regulations must be in accordance with the comprehensive plan, which is why a comprehensive plan is very important for communities to update every so often. Part of the comprehensive plan, another important piece of it, is that part of the implementation of comprehensive plan is to adopt regulations, policies, and also move forward with particular projects that support the goals and objective of a comprehensive plan. So that's why it's really important to get public input throughout a comprehensive plan process, because the comprehensive plan really creates a framework for which the town will move forward. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit about the comprehensive plan process and the town of Lewisboro. So first of all, Nelson Pope and Voorhees, we were the consultant team to help put together the actionable goals, objectives, and recommendations. And we also drafted the comprehensive plan, and we're drafting the zoning. But that being said, we can't draft anything until we get input from the town. And so through the town, you have the steering committee. The steering committee actually manages the process. And this steering committee has been involved in this process for many years. And Katie, do you remember what year you started gathering together as a committee before we got to this point?
It's been more than 3 years, actually.
Yes. So they've been meeting diligently monthly to not only learn about the comprehensive plan and the comprehensive plan process, but to make sure the community engagement really was robust and that they made sure as many people throughout the community were aware of this process and were able to provide input. The Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee had residents from the town of Lewisboro, as well as liaisons from the town board, the planning board, zoning board of appeals, architecture community and appearance review council, as well as the conservation advisory councils. You also have the town board, which is a very important role in the comprehensive plan because ultimately they have to adopt the comprehensive plan. So, and they also have to adopt all the zoning and they have to make sure that all the laws and regulations are followed through with the adoption of the comprehensive plan process. And then the other thing I wanted to just highlight is the outreach teams, right? These outreach teams were kudos to everybody that was involved in the outreach teams. They really helped spread the word throughout the community. They helped engage the community and they also made sure that everybody was as involved as possible and had a chance to be able to provide input. Next slide. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the deliverables throughout a comprehensive plan process. The first was the inventory analysis report. That report became available sometime in December. And basically an inventory analysis report is your baseline. So basically answers the question, where are we now, right? And so in the inventory analysis report, it identifies, the existing conditions of all the different environmental topics that get discussed throughout the comprehensive plan. It also really basically provides a baseline for community engagement strategies, as well as the first workshops that provided maps of existing conditions and then really allowed for people to respond to those maps. The second component is the actual comprehensive plan itself, which identifies the visions, the goals, and objectives. And then during that comprehensive plan process, or the drafting of the comprehensive plan's goals and visions, we also received additional feedback. And then finally, the third piece is the actual zoning amendments themselves. And again, these zoning amendments are really specifically to support the goals and objectives in a comprehensive plan. And then the final piece to all of this will be the environmental review for the comprehensive plan, as well as the town board adopting both the comprehensive plan and the zoning. Next slide. So outreach and engagement. So we just wanted to give everybody a little bit more information as to the robust outreach and engagement process that this particular town of comprehensive plan went through. First of all, you had comprehensive plan steering committee meetings, and as Katie mentioned, that they've been meeting for over 3 years. We also had 3 public workshops. We had outreach teams to both the town committees as well as town boards and the public. We had surveys, media blasts, social media. And everything has been posted since day one to the town of Lewisboro's comprehensive plan webpage. And then also we have an email contact steering@planlewisboro.com, which the public has been able to also use to engage and ask questions on the comprehensive plan process. Next slide. All right, so again, just a little bit more information on the outreach and engagement. We also had town websites. There were weekly emails that went out. There were Instagram. There was engagement on social media. There was also attendance at various festivals and town events, additional direct emails specifically to firehouses, parent teachers organizations, text systems through the school district. So there was a lot of avenues that were explored in order to provide outreach and engagement and to get people involved within the community. Next slide. So again, just wanted to touch a little bit upon there were 3 workshops specifically. The first round was open. It was basically open-ended feedback. This took place in person back about basically a year ago, a little over a year ago. We had 122 people attend. The first workshop focused on the town's strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities. It also sought input on the comprehensive plan vision, as well as taking additional information on what they saw in the maps and baseline conditions, and getting initial concerns from the public in terms of topic areas as well as potential projects. And we also had a public survey that accompanied this particular workshop. So people were also able to respond on public survey. And then we also had 2 virtual meetings as well. And we had a total of 70 people attend those, and 160 people respond to the survey. Then the second round focused on review of the draft vision and then goals and objectives. And these were really focused on Hamlet, the individual Hamlet areas. The workshop asked for feedback on not only the goals and objectives, but also for people to identify specific projects in their Hamlet areas that would support the goals and objectives. And then finally, this workshop also had a survey to allow additional public participation. So we had 122 people, and ironically, it really was the same amount of people attend the second round of workshops, and we had 161 people respond on the public survey. So to date, we had 635 people respond, and based upon the responses that we received, it helped us to get to the draft document that you see today, as well as the zoning amendments. Next slide. Okay, so let's talk about the plan itself. We have the plan. The plan actually has a vision statement that was developed by the community. And so I really just I'm not going to read through the whole vision statement, but what I want to just highlight specifically is that in the next 10 years, Lewisboro will continue to maintain its rural and open character while evolving to increase social connections and a neighborhood feel within the hamlets, strive to improve day-to-day operations by exploring possible technological additions, sewage improvements, and water regulations, create additional connections through various transportation-focused means, allowing for better access for all to areas of interest, including but not limited to shopping areas, parks, and schools. Pursue an environmentally sustainable future by protecting and enhancing existing natural and historic resources, transitioning to renewable energy, and developing climate resilience initiatives. Work towards an economically sustainable future by expanding community-based businesses and local agriculture. And then finally, to seek to expand and diversify housing opportunities while respecting existing architectural characteristics and scale of buildings within Lewisboro. Next slide. So this vision really came about because of some really key planning considerations that were identified pretty early on in the process. And one of the things that we heard from the residents of Lewisboro is that basically Lewisboro, you love Lewisboro, right? You love your overall character. We've heard it over and over again that people really move to Lewisboro because of the character of the area. We also heard that the lake communities and hamlet areas are important identifiers in terms of residential neighborhoods, characteristics, and geography, right? People, when you spoke to people throughout the town, a lot of people would refer to themselves from a particular hamlet area before they referred to themselves as the town of Lewisboro. But more importantly, though, we also heard throughout this process that people also very much wanted to see the cohesion between the different the hamlet areas and also the town of Lewisboro as well. Lewisboro's natural resources are also extremely important to the residents. It's the wooded areas, the wetlands, the lakes. The hamlet centers are very important commercial centers to each and every hamlet, as well as to the town overall. Accessibility, inclusivity are very important to this community, and issues related to septic and water quality of the lakes are paramount. And we heard that time and time again, no matter what hamlet area we were focused on, very similar topic areas and very similar responses were coming in as part of this. And so these were really the overall key planning considerations that helped really develop the vision as well as the goals and objectives. Next slide. So what we have here in this map, and it's also in the comprehensive plan itself, is basically what we're calling the future land use map. And the future land use map basically just visualizes a depiction of the town's future for the future vision of land use in general. So how does the town want to evolve, or where does it really want to focus a lot of its, its evolution, or if there's additional development, where do you want to focus your additional development? And what we really heard throughout all of this is that the town of Lewisboro doesn't necessarily want to make wholesale changes, but just really more tweaks to your existing basically land uses. So basically what we have here in this map is that your residential areas will remain residential, right? That's the primary focus of those areas, and it should be. Your hamlet centers and your lake communities should continue evolving as they have been. The lake communities in particular is really going to be focused on like water quality and trying to improve water quality of the lakes. But then also your hamlet centers, it's really focusing on evolving those hamlet centers into, promoting the small businesses, maybe enhancing those hamlet centers in terms of basically architecture as well as curb appeal, and really trying to make it known that when you land in Lewisboro, you're here in Lewisboro, and maybe have some sort of synergies between some of the hamlet centers. And also the other thing was that basically enhancing the existing land uses as well as enhancing the landscape throughout the town. So the special character districts, which are the areas in pink, are ones that are already identified from your last comprehensive plan. And what we heard is we should continue keeping those within for the future. And that if at some point in time, some other areas need to be added to those special character districts, they could. But at this point, those character districts should remain as is. And those are more of, for those who are not familiar with that, you're more of your historical areas within the town. Next slide. So based on that, the goals and objectives in the comprehensive plan really focused on a number of different topics, and that is land use and zoning, housing, economic development, natural resources, climate change, sustainability and resiliency, infrastructure, community facilities and services, transportation and mobility, community character, and historic preservation. So overall, in the comprehensive plan, there are 19 goals and 105 objectives. I promise you I will not be reading through all 105 objectives tonight, but I'll give you a little summary of where we are with the various environmental topics. Next slide. All right, so under land use and zoning, goals 1 and 2, goal 1 really focuses on align new development with Lewisboro's current character, architectural styling, rural setting, and scale of buildings. And goal 2 is update zoning to accommodate Lewisboro's changing needs and goals. Basically, the land use and zoning, the goals and objectives associated with this really focused on housekeeping and updating your land uses as well as your zoning to reflect best practices. It really focuses on improving the quality of life, such as looking at regulations related to lighting, landscaping, parking, and environmental resource protection. And it also focuses on making sure regulations will assist the town in implementing its vision. It also focuses on emphasis on existing character, as well as checking consistency with New York State town law in terms of your regulatory systems. Next slide. Housing, that is goal 3, and that is promote diverse housing opportunities, accommodating all generations within Lewisboro. This really focused on reviewing zoning regulations, not necessarily making any wholesale changes, but tweaks to existing regulations. So where, for example, and we'll talk a little bit about this in terms of your zoning amendments later on in the presentation, but like, for example, the accessory apartments, looking at those regulations again, making sure that there's no obstacles to prevent people from moving forward with accessory apartments, or you already permit apartments in your commercial districts as mixed use, making sure that there's no obstacles there in the zoning that would prevent somebody from being able to move forward with the basically the purpose of the the mixed use zones as they're developed. Also, a couple other things, there are slightly larger changes in some of to bring in additional housing into Lewisboro. And this was specifically something we heard through the community, and this really focused on senior housing. So in the zoning amendments, and we'll talk a little bit about more detail a little bit later on, but a senior housing floating zone. And basically what a floating zone is that if for some reason a particular project meets a certain criteria, they could petition the town board to land that project in a particular location in the town of Lewisboro. And this would be really focused only on senior housing. And it would be something that the town board would have to vote for in order to move forward. It's not something as of right in a particular zoning district. The other things that the housing really focused on was maybe looking at conducting a housing study. There was some concern about affordable housing and just in terms of bringing the youth back into Lewisboro and having them be able to afford to live here when they get older. Also, apartments above ground floor retail. Again, it was something that's already there in your zoning, but how do you tweak it to make sure that it actually can move forward? And then also reviewing apartment and affordable housing regulations was another thing that was identified as a goal. Next slide. So the next area was economic development. There were two goals associated with this. Goal 4 is to provide an environment that fosters the expansion of local business opportunities within Lewisboro to provide long-term economic stability and diversity to the community in keeping with the general community environment. And this really focused on reviewing zoning to make sure to remove obstacles that hinder maybe the establishment of small businesses, also work towards assisting and promoting existing businesses, working with the business community, and also focusing on creating curb appeal and enhancing the hamlet centers so for the businesses as well. The other thing, goal 5 was diversify agriculturally based land uses throughout the town to strengthen food security and promote a local and regional agricultural economy. This is really to focus on like promoting a local agricultural economy on like a small scale, review zoning to assist in diversifying agricultural uses or add-on businesses or opportunities. So for example, you have an accessory winery that could be associated with agriculture, but are there other abilities to have on little add-on businesses for some of your agricultural lands? And also promoting the protection of your current farms within the town of Lewisboro. I mean, really part of it is that the farms themselves also create that character. So how do you really try to maintain that and also allow them to sustain themselves in the long term? Next slide. All right, so natural resources was another really important topic to the town. Goals 6 and 7. Goal 6 is protect, preserve, promote, and improve access and connectivity to Lewisboro's existing natural resources. And this really focused on building upon work that has already been done, such as supporting work of the Open Space Preservation Advisory Committee, the Trail Maintenance Program, also reauthorizing the Open Space Bond Fund, which helps preserve natural resources, and then also continuing to preserve the natural resources that you already have within the town. Also, goal 7 was to protect and enhance the health of existing natural resources and the town streams, lakes, reservoirs, their floodplains, tributaries, riparian areas, and associated wetland complexes. And this really focused on reviewing environmental regulations and code enforcement to strengthen those to make sure that the natural resources are protected, and also work with the lake communities for funding opportunities to address the water quality issues. Next slide. So one of the things we wanted to show you here, and there's a number of maps throughout the comprehensive plan, and there's a lot of maps in the inventory analysis, which is an appendix to the comprehensive plan. But basically what you see here is your areas in green, pink, and blue are all areas of where water resources, wetlands, aquifers, and so they're really important areas within the town. And so that was one of the reasons and why that natural resources became an extremely important component of this comprehensive plan, and really a focus on water quality issues as well as wetland resources. Next slide. Okay, so the next goal was goal 8, which is incorporate new sustainable and green infrastructure technology and building practices to support the goals of reducing overall greenhouse gas emissions and improving climate change resiliency. And the specific objectives for this goal really focused on including updating regulations for new technologies such as EV charging, solar, battery energy storage. These technologies are here, but yet your regulations are silent to them. So it's how to, and not necessarily, just the wholesale automatically permit those, but to look at them, how would they fit most appropriately within the town? And then also additional concerns or requirements so that if somebody is going to install these new technologies, how they don't end up becoming a nuisance or a problem to neighbors. So in terms of looking at, and we'll be developing more of these regulations as we move through, but in terms of like low lighting, noise, size, scaling, and also setbacks and landscaping or screening. Also continue supporting programs such as repair, cafe, electric lawn equipment, or, community swap or yard sales. Those were also things that were very important. And then also look at lighting regulations to incorporate best practices for dark sky lightings and requirements. And then also promoting and educating people about sustainable and green buildings and designs. So really holistically is looking at how to make Lewisboro more sustainable, more resilient, and then also incorporating new technologies. Next slide. All right, so then there's 2 goals related to infrastructure. Goal 9 is focused on maintaining and upgrading existing infrastructure with a focus on longevity and sustainability to support Lewisboro's current and future community facilities, homes, and businesses. And then goal 10 is modernize and expand infrastructure that will lead to increased technology access and a better quality of life. For sure, we heard about 3 things over and over again. It dealt with, electrical power outages. It dealt with septic systems. And we also heard a lot about wireless systems and broadband. So really the objectives associated with these 2 goals really focus on strengthening septic system regulations and working in partnership with the Lake communities for water quality funding. Implementing the wireless master plan study with Westchester County, but basically focusing on how to improve wireless communications within the town and also broadband, and then reducing noise pollution along the state highways, including, especially including Interstate 684, and then also specifically focusing on power outages and how to become a little bit more resilient to those types of system breakdowns, especially during storms. Next slide. So communities, facilities, and services. So there's 4 goals associated with this one. The first is enhanced accessibility and inclusivity for Lewisboro's public spaces and community facilities. Maintain and upgrade existing recreational facilities to provide increased recreational opportunities, increased accessibility. Continue to work towards creating an equitable and inclusive town for all. And then continue to support government departments and provide necessary resources for departmental functions. A lot of this really focused on accessibility through ADA compliance, maintaining and upgrading recreational facilities, focusing on all the New York State roads, especially dealing with traffic calming, providing key connections between neighborhoods, community services, and public transit routes, increasing bike and pedestrian safety and accessibility, public transit enhancement as much as possible, and then basically an overall safe streets for all approach. Next slide. We also have community character and historic preservation. So there's 2 goals associated with this. This is preserve Lewisboro's existing rural and community character and promote its historic resources. Ensure that the town's gateways, hamlet centers, and scenic corridors are maintained and foster a strong town-wide identity. And this really focused on working towards strengthening the town's historic preservation initiatives. This includes working with the Landmarks Advisory Committee, also protecting the town's historic attributes, and then visually enhancing its gateways, its hamlet centers, and scenic corridors. Next slide. Okay, so with that, Basically, in the comprehensive plan, the one other major piece to it is an actual implementation matrix. And what we went through is each one of the goals and objectives. We identified those as either short term, which is implementation within the 3 years of adoption, medium term implementation within 4 to 7 years of adoption, and then long term, which would be implemented within 10 years of adoption. And the matrix itself is found in the comprehensive plan, and it's at the beginning of the document. And so basically, the comprehensive plan itself, the matrix assists in providing basically a general time frame, but each year the town board should get together and review the goals and objectives to see the progress and then identify priorities for the following year. Next slide. So the zoning work, as I said before, is really basically the implementation of the goals and objectives in the comprehensive plan. We're calling them batches. That's what we've been doing since the beginning. So we already have the first batch posted. Again, it's draft, so there are still some tweaks that are going to be taking place on the drafts that are posted. And then there'll be a second batch coming forward. But I just wanted to highlight right now what the general zoning is going to entail. So first of all, we looked at both the residential and non-residential, what we call bulk regulations, which are basically, your setbacks, your densities, and also the other regulations associated with developing in either non-residential and non-residential areas. And as I said before, the three biggest areas that we focused on were really looking at accessory apartments, your business districts, and then also the senior floating zone. So for example, in the accessory apartments, you do have in your regulations currently what we call accessory residence dwellings, which basically allows you to have another dwelling unit separate from the principal house on a property. And right now in the town's code, it requires you to have 20 acres in order to be able to develop this additional dwelling unit. And the purpose of, when you actually look at the regulations, the purpose of it seemed to be that they want to make sure that if you develop the separate dwelling unit on a property, that it could easily be subdividable. And so what we're suggesting is, instead of requiring 20 acres, that the minimum lot area be defined as 2 times the requirement for an individual lot in a zoning district. So basically, you would be able to subdivide it at some point in time into 2 individual single family dwelling units. But if you choose not to at that point in time, you could still move forward with this particular project. Of course, any of these things would still require review before your planning boards. But that was one of the changes that we were suggesting. Another change that we also suggested really focused on the business, the mixed use for the business districts. Previously, it was required that in your 4 business districts that you needed to have 5 acres in order to develop one additional unit as like a mixed use building, in which mixed use, when we refer to it, is like commercial on the bottom and maybe some apartments on top. And we're suggesting reducing that from 5 acres to 2 acres. So we're keeping the same densities. All we're just saying is that 5 acres seems a lot of land to be able to even just start with developing an additional dwelling unit. And this is one way of being able to provide additional housing within the town, but then not really changing your overall character within the community, or putting additional units in areas that are already maybe undeveloped or wooded. And this is already areas that you are allowed to develop housing, but we felt that 5 acres was probably too large for a starting point, and 2 acres we are suggesting. The other thing we're also suggesting is that we're also suggesting for a senior housing floating zone, and this would be very similar to, in terms of densities and stuff, as what we already allow as the mixed use districts in your commercial districts. And this one would require at least 15 acres in order to be able to even be considered. And this would be something that would have to be, as I said before, approved by the town board And it would be something that somebody would have to petition for the town board in order to be able to land that particular development. But the idea would be focused on senior housing, which is 55 and older. And it would specifically require certain open space characteristics and avoidance of natural resources. So there's a lot of requirements that would be put in it, and it's there and posted online right now. But basically what it is it's providing additional opportunities, especially for people who want to remain in Lewisboro, but decide that they don't want to continue living in their single family house and are looking to downsize into something a little bit smaller. A number of the other zoning changes that we're recommending deal with quality of life issues, like we said before: parking, landscaping, exterior lighting, bringing things up to more standards, dark skies, requiring native plants. We also looked at definitions and uses, and we actually removed any definitions that were not in your zoning. We also looked at developing new definitions or updating definitions for certain uses. We are not proposing any new uses. What we did do was we created a table now of all your uses, where before everything was written out in your zoning. So that's one change, but we didn't necessarily propose any new uses. The one thing we did actually clarify was that you actually have a couple veterinarian offices within the town, but there was never a veterinarian office listed in your zoning. So you now will be able to have those veterinarian offices. We also looked at wetlands, steep slopes, and excavation and fill, and developed regulations for those. Wetlands, you already have regulations for, but what we did was we really focused on your current process and your current approval process, and made sure that was reflected in your zoning, in the new amendments. And then also we specifically added a architectural review for historic buildings or ones that are historically listed, where before there was no architectural review required for those particular buildings, especially if they were outside of the special character overlay. The second batch of zoning, which will be forthcoming within the next few weeks, and those will also be posted online. They're going to focus on sidewalk maintenance standards, EV charging spaces, specifically having regulations put in place for any potential EV charging, updating farm and what we call animal husbandry standards. So for example, to allow for, so for example, if a farmer wants to have some chickens or some other animals, right now you do allow it, but again, it's one of those things where you actually had a requirement that you had to have 2 acres of land for the first animal, and that included like a chicken. So we thought that might be a little bit too many acres that you would need for those types of animals. When we looked at the actual New York State agricultural requirements, and we also looked at what other communities did, and so we were suggesting, and those will be forthcoming, but suggesting some actual numbers that better reflect what animals actually need, and what would also better reflect for actually being able to support some of the to help some of the agricultural farms. Then we also looked at we're also looking at battery energy storage and solar regulations. You do allow for solar panels, but there are going to be potentially some other solar installations as well as battery energy storage that would be coming forth through the town of Lewisboro, and this would help provide regulations for those. We're also going to be looking at short-term rental regulations, because that's something that seems to have become an issue, especially over the last year or so. Wireless regulations will also be updated, and then we will also be looking at your septic system regulations and putting a little bit more requirements in those in terms of actually pump outs as well as inspections. So next slide, Katie. So what does that mean? What are our next steps? And, so we're going to continue working on the draft zoning revisions. After we have those posted, we are going to develop office hours, and those will be advertised, and basically what we're calling them office hours. So if you have very specific questions on any of the zoning that's being proposed, we will designate certain time that you can come, you can call, or it could either be a Zoom meeting. We might do some in person, and you can get your questions answered, and happy to talk to you about your individual property or just very specific things that you want to know about the zoning. And then there will also be public hearings. The public hearings will take place on the draft comprehensive plan as well as the zoning amendments. And then ultimately, after the public hearings, would be the adoption of the comprehensive plan and zoning. So with that, last slide, Katie. All right, so with that, this is how you can continue participating and contacting. So the Lewisboro comprehensive plan website is www.lewisboro.gov.com/CMPSC. You can also email the town with steering committee at planlewisboro.com. And then you can also reach out to any of the comprehensive plan steering committee members. So thank you. And what we'll do is we'll open it up for question and answers. And so we thought Kirsten's going to sort of be the MC for that. We're going to split between in-person questions and questions online.
And thank you so much, everybody. This is Katie on Zoom. I'll be helping with traffic control. But I just want to emphasize, thank you so much to Valerie for the presentation. Everything we talked about tonight, as she pointed out, is still in draft form. And the purpose of the Q&A is for Valerie and her other team members who are participating in this event as well to capture the community's feedback, integrate everything into the final drafts of the plan and the zoning amendments, and then those need to be passed to the town board, and then the town board is going to have a set of public hearings. So just reframing that for everybody, so we still have a little ways to go before these documents are final.
That's correct.
Richard, would you like to go to the lectern?
Actually, the only question I have is whether I can get a copy of this presentation. And
Oh, yeah. So the presentation is actually online, but if you need a paper copy or something, I'm sure we can work that out. Absolutely.
Oh, and I have a question for folks on Zoom. To ask your questions, please raise your hand, and we will be keeping track of who's asking questions, and we'll call on you and ask you to unmute. And yes, to re-emphasize, on the town website, the link you see here, there are copies of the comprehensive plan itself, the zoning, the proposed draft zoning, this presentation, and tons of other resources.
Kevin Catone?
Yes, I had some questions. They were specific to where I live, which is Old Golden's Bridge.
Sure.
As far as zoning proposals or recommendations that you guys are going to give to the town, do you have anything that you can define now, or is that something I should be waiting for?
No. So basically what I summarized tonight, so we heard loud and clear throughout this process that it was really important that any zoning that we provide or we looked at really focused on the town overall. So the senior housing overlay that I was talking about earlier, or excuse me, senior housing floating zone that I was talking about earlier, actually could be applied townwide. Right? It's not targeted at any particular hamlet area, which I know was a concern from the public that we heard from loud and clear that the public felt that certain areas of the town always seem to be focused for development. So that was one thing that when we specifically developed that floating zone, that it could technically be landed anywhere in the town, depending, again, it's not something that's as of right. It would have to be petitioned before the town board. Other than that, everything else that is already existing or that was already permitted is still going to continue to be permitted within Golden's Bridge Hamlet area and all the other hamlet areas. And we're not proposing any wholesale changes to the zoning in any particular hamlet area.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Marianne Lansdale?
Hi, this is John Lansdale. This is not Mary Ann. She explicitly tells me to tell you that. Not her opinion or idea. Um, I didn't hear any mention of an important new phenomenon anywhere. It started with COVID, but it's the outdoor office shed. There are these prefabricated buildings that cost about $30,000, and instead of being a shed, they're a nice desk and they're like 6x6 to 6x10 or something. They're small. But we have any provision for them? Or are they all like they're treated like sheds? That probably should be considered somewhere. I don't know where though.
So we'll take a look at that. I mean, we'll take a look at what your accessory structures are in terms of sheds, but I believe sheds are a permitted accessory structure. In terms of actual use or what takes place inside the shed, we can take a look to see if that's an issue that needs to be looked at or further defined.
They're probably a good thing, but I hope you guys consider them. Okay, that's all.
Okay, thank you.
Stephen, could you go to the lectern?
Sure.
Please.
So I just had two things I wanted to ask about. One was in the vision statement, in the full breadth of the vision statement that was in the document, it had referenced beautifying the corridors and the entries into the town. And so I thought that was very good. However, in the document itself, in the other sections of community services and facilities, I didn't see any mention of that anywhere other than the vision statement. So I just wanted to make sure if you could review that and look at that and ensure that's something that's very important. I'm a Vista resident, and I think when you come into the town right now, other than the Welcome to New York sign, there's really no mention of our town or any kind of beautification. The corridor that runs along the state road is actually quite dense and messy. So anything to let visitors know they're entering Lewisboro from all the state borders would be great.
Sure. And just, I would recommend taking a look at, goal 19 and some of the objectives under there. So we specifically, and we will look at it to make sure that that we're really emphasizing that. But a couple of things that we did put in there is specifically, objective 19.1 is beautify the main town transportation corridors, especially entrances into the town. Objective 19.2 is create and install appealing signage at the road entry points into the town and beautification of those entry points that will visually unify the town. And then we specifically noted preserve and the scenic, rural, and historic character of the town's roads, and then work with businesses to improve overall curb appeal and site maintenance.
Okay.
So, but we will definitely make sure that we can look back at that section and that goal and just to make sure that it's really emphasized
All
in
right.
there.
Thank you.
But that is something that was important to the community and we tried to pick that up.
Thank you. And then the second was, as a Vista resident and also a member of the Vista Hamlet Stewardship Council, we had expressed interest and advocacy for the study of a shared use path from the Connecticut-New York State border up to Elmwood Road. And the document had referenced a bike path from Glen Drive to the shopping center. So I just wanted to, what we were advocating for and what we had expressed interest in was differently represented in the plan versus what we had asked for.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we actually received that comment. And so we are looking to incorporate that because that was not the intent. The intent was because we did see the overall, plan or vision that was developed by the committee. And so we did try to weave that in. So we are going to take a look at that and update that.
Okay.
So yeah,
Okay.
that's definitely something we're going to do.
That's it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Joseph Verchesi, could you unmute, please?
Hi, my name is Joe Versessi. I Golden's Bridge. I just had one question. Is there a place, and maybe it's online, where we could see exactly what the changes are versus their existing codes?
Yeah, so we tried to do that, except in a couple of the chapters, we redlined them like so much. Mostly because we were really making changes in terms of the actual structure of the chapter itself. So I can work with Katie and maybe the steering committee how best to do that to kind of bring that information along so you can see the before and after. But in terms of I would recommend there's a couple sections that we might not be able to do that but other ones we will be able to. And so we can update that with track changes if you like.
Joseph, if you're done, we'll switch to Jennifer Cipriano.
Thank you.
And if anything, just one other thing, with that, if it becomes too messy to show the track changes, what we might do is just highlight those sections for you to specifically look at the ones that have changed or have substantive changes in them.
Good evening. Thank you so much. So I'm just going to tag along with what Stephen said before. I live and am a business owner in Vista. And so we just wanted to see a more comprehensive approach to that path in Vista. I think the important thing is we keep hearing the word sidewalk used, and what we were hoping for is what lends itself to many of the things repeated throughout the plan, which is a way to connect the community that can be used by all. We have a lot of trails, beautiful, beautiful trails that are maintained in our town, but not all of them can be used by everyone. And so a path, a shared use path, I just think a bike lane isn't, what we're thinking long-term would really connect, and it's unique where we have a park at one end. It starts in Vista, it's the very end of the town, and we have the opportunity to connect it to another major park with other trails and so forth, which is Onatru. And so we really want to see it as a long-term approach.
Okay.
And so we really appreciate that. And as a business owner, I keep hearing mention of working with the business owners, and I'm not sure if it's your place or where do you make suggestions to the town of how the town approaches working with the businesses to make those kinds of things happen. I'm not clear, like where you come in on that.
So I would recommend, if you have some time, take a look at the economic development chapter in the comprehensive plan, specifically goal 4, and see if that helps answer that question. I mean, we specifically note, and so I have the goals, and I don't know, Danielle, if you can just take a look to see if there's a little bit more specifics in there, but I know for the objectives, we specifically noted, explore working with business owners to create an attractive built environment that will enhance opportunities for new and current businesses, explore ways to identify funding to assist businesses in the hamlet areas, and explore developing additional programs or opportunities to promote the existing businesses within Lewisboro. And so if, Danielle, if you can go down to.
Katie, I'm on page 125 with all the objectives.
Okay.
No, but can you look under goal 4 and for some of the details?
Yeah.
Stay on that.
Yes. So goal 4 is to provide an environment that fosters the expansion of local business opportunities within Lewisboro, to provide long-term economic stability and diversity to the community in keeping with the general community environment.
Yeah, and if you go down, Katie, under objective 4.5, start there. So, I mean, this is where we start providing a little bit of like more general information, is specifically looking at ways to potentially get some additional funding, like through New York State, and potentially some types of like programs that could be looked at. A lot of it is developing the framework, and then the town can decide which ones, or the business community can go to the town and say, we'd like to try to start working on some of those programs. But take a look at that section, and then if you have additional comments, email them to the steering committee.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it's really more broad and general.
It is, as opposed to very specific things. Now, I mean, this is still part of the public comment and public feedback. So as we were as we did not identify very specific things that came to our attention that the town business community was specifically interested in. So if there's something that you know about that you'd like to bring it to our attention, please do so. That'd be
Thank you
great.
so much. Thank you.
Before I go to our next Zoom raised hand, does anyone in the room want to sign up to comment? You could pass that around, that would be great. And I have Alex with your hand raised.
Thank you. Yes, this is Alex Gregor. I'm a local resident in South Salem. I had a couple of questions. One, I just wanted to sort of echo what Joseph earlier said about the track changes from the existing to the proposed. I think that's extremely important. A lot of us bought and invested in properties here, sort of trying to understand what was currently able to do and not able to do. And it would be very good to see what is becoming more restricted and what is perhaps you would qualify as more opportunities as well. I understand that sometimes the documents are hard to marry up, but it sort of brings me to another sort of broader point, which is Lewisboro is famously very difficult to do much in. All the other towns and areas would say as much, I think, about what the difficulties we often face. And it seems like on a lot of the documents that I'm reading, there's a doubling down of using the use or the required use of consultants, various experts, and it's reduced to a pool of only a handful of engineers and architects and so on that are familiar with Lewisboro's regulations. And there's sort of a real bottleneck there in terms of using those people repeatedly at very high fees to come before the town because they're the only ones that understand the policies. I'm wondering if there's any way to expand how those consultants are specifically supposed to be used. Another point I just wanted to bring up was you've mentioned a part about transportation and public transportation, but I don't really see anything anywhere other than the acknowledgement that the train happens to run through the town. Is there any thought of perhaps thinking about offering local public transportation to get to trains and so on from the various hamlets that and shopping centers as well, certainly for the older community that are not currently available? I also just, if I understand what you said, there's no new zonings proposed. So am I to understand that the current existing business zoning, the commercial zoning will stay as is? So there's no ability for businesses to open anywhere else. Is that correct? And then the final one was just the power grid. It would be great to have a survey of the power grid and where the important nodes are. When one part goes down, it seems to knock out large parts of the town. Where are those and can they be made more resilient? And are there any requirements moving forward that might be that certain cables are buried as work is done on the roads or something? Is that something you're thinking? Thank you.
Okay, so to start off with your first question dealing with the zoning, so we are going to try to look for highlighting or track changes for some of the zoning. I think the most difficult piece is the district regulations, where we took everything that was in written form and turned it into a table. So basically most of it seems like it's redlined, but in all reality, it's just shifting it from text to table. So, but what we can do is we'll try to highlight specifically the substantive changes within the code. In terms of the questions with the public transportation. So there is a whole transportation and mobility section, and there is goal 16 specifically focuses on create opportunities for increased public transportation resources within Lewisboro. And so within goal objectives 16.1 and 16.2, it specifically talks about the public transit that you have available in the town, and then potential ways of trying to expand that public transportation. So please take a look at that section. And if you have any comments on that, email the email address at steering at lewisboro.gov, right? That's the
Steering at lewisboro.gov.com.
Thank you. And then also in terms of some of the electrical, we do have a area in the infrastructure chapter where it does talk a little bit about some of the issues with power outages, and specifically I think in goal 10, it was talking a little bit about modernizing and expanding infrastructure that will lead to technology access and better quality of life. And that's where a lot of that really focused on in terms of, and then also goal 9, specifically objective 9.9, explore reducing electrical power outages during storm events by investigating ways to improve infrastructure, including but not limited to burying utility lines in the most vulnerable areas. So I would check that objective out, and I think that probably would address the concerns that you raised in that. Next question. I think I answered.
And I misquoted my own email address. It's steering@planlewisboro.
Thank you.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
evening. I'm gonna go off on a few tangents, but
Okay.
on this last call, as last call, Steve mentioned, there are boards and consultants with too much power, and you call to refer to them always. So when we were reading the other evening with the VHAC group, we noticed a lot of refer back to the planning board, refer back to the boards. The problem is the bottlenecks that are created. So you kind of limit opportunities. So what we see is the business community tries to move forward, but are always constantly either stopped with a 6-year process, 8-year process, 2-year process. And I understand that's New York, but there's got to be a way of adjusting that or having a conversation about it so that we can move forward as a community, businesses and residences together. Maybe an in-house engineer, promoting agriculture. We need an ag member in both the CAC and planning board. We need more representation. If you want to promote ag in this community, you need members on those boards, or you will not promote anything. I'm not sure if that's you can make those types of recommendations. I'm not sure. Also, can we get business owners on some of these boards? Would it be a way of reaching out to business owners as well as residents? Because business owners do have a stake of what happens in this community as well. Okay, as a member of the VHSC and a resident of Vista, are we inclusive? Economically, I don't think so. Can zoning be Hamlet specific? I think Vista is a different hamlet, is very different and similar to Golden's Ridge. So I see zoning, but it seems like it covers Wacabuck and Lewisboro and South Salem, but Golden's Ridge and Vista are very different. So maybe there's opportunities for that. I don't work for the state. I have no idea. Jennifer wanted to mention something. Our walkability score in this town is a 1 out of 100, not a 1 out of 10. I thought it was 1 out of 10. It's a 1 out of 100. We have no walkability in this town. So yeah, that has to be addressed. I know there's so many other things to address in this town, but that should be one of the first things. Another thing, better quality of life. One of the better quality of life issues would be our water. We want better water quality, and we understand we have wetlands. We have a sewage plant at Vista. All you need to do is run a pipe across the street, and you're going to not allow all that PFAS to get into our drinking water that we're obtaining through our wells, not only at Oak Ridge. So it's simple things. We have some infrastructure, but it seems like we're talking about lakes that don't even have sewer systems, and Vista has a huge sewer system that is underutilized, and we still haven't even spoken about it. I don't think anywhere. Economic development. Can we get an Empire Zone? Anything? Can we get some help? Anyway, I think that's it. You're doing a great
So
job.
I don't think you qualify in it for an Empire zone, but there are some, there are some economic development, like through the CFAs, which are the consolidated funding applications that are each year. They actually are open to both, government as well as private, developers or property owners to apply for various funding. So that's something that we did identify in the economic development chapter, is like working with the town to help identify maybe some of those grants or projects that, business owners can look at. I think in terms of the zoning changes for the commercial businesses, that's where we started looking at some of the mixed use to allow for some of those elements to be able to maybe move forward a little bit more. In terms of looking at potential business development and business uses. I mean, part of what we were trying to do was trying to streamline at least the code in the sense of like organizing the permitted uses versus conditional use. Permitted uses versus uses that need special permits to try to prevent some back and forth between like some of the boards. So we tried to work on, taking special use permits out of like from the zoning board and putting a lot of them towards the planning board. So it's just you're going to one board as opposed to two different boards. So if there are specific items that you are concerned with in terms of business development and businesses that you find as an obstacle, please let us know what those are, because then that's something we can take a look at as while we're developing the zoning.
One now, just, you're looking at the zone regulations today. We're very confused with it. It looked like that you guys are gonna have more requirements for parking, greater and larger parking lots. And the movement is away from that because of the water issues and everything else. So that's one of the things that I don't understand.
So in the parking, we actually we did make some modifications to the parking, and that specifically is going to focus on for shared, like we specifically try to develop more shared parking and like EV charging stations, especially in the commercial uses, instead of we're putting in some language in there that if somebody comes in with an EV charging, that could potentially be counted as a parking space as opposed to an additional parking space that would be required. So there are some language that we're trying to work into the parking to try to minimize the overall parking requirements in terms of like commercial businesses to especially if you have mixed uses where you have like a restaurant and maybe like, I'm going to say a landscaping place that's open during the day, peak is at night, that you could also coordinate in terms of combined spaces and parking sharing. So we are not proposing to increase parking requirements at all in any of the business districts.
A lot of that, you're starting to see the country moving away and decreasing the parking.
Right, that's correct.
And I don't want it to be that our town is the only one that maintains a steady parking requirement or increase it.
Right, so we did look at your parking requirements that you have currently against standards, and they are pretty much standard, but the biggest thing was the actual shared parking, combined parking, just emphasizing that a little bit more, making that a little bit easier.
That email that we received is going to be adjusted in terms of the parking.
I'm not sure what email you. Right, so I think a lot of that is probably there already in your code. So we'll highlight what we are proposing to change. The other stuff is already there and that's been set. It's not necessarily new zoning text. Yeah, excellent.
Okay, can we move to someone on Zoom?
Yep.
Looking for Paul Schneier.
Hi, can you hear me? This is Laura Friedman. I'm Paul Schneer's wife, and I just wondered, is there a calendared timeline for any of this plan? And is there a final timeline for the document release?
So the draft documents are online currently, but in terms of final adoption, that we're anticipating that being sometime by the spring. In terms of the actual implementation of the different goals and objectives, there is an implementation matrix within the comprehensive plan that specifically identifies like short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals. And that will be, again, a lot of that will be up to the town and the town board as to when they ultimately decide on which items to implement, but a lot of the short-term items are actually being taken care of in the what I'm calling zoning, but it's also your town code amendments and updates.
So it's somewhat soft, but there is progress being made on some of these various things.
Yes, and that was one of the that was the intentions of the town from the get-go, is to actually have implementation as part of the comprehensive plan process, where other communities sometimes adopt the comprehensive plan and then start the zoning work, and that really just prolongs things. And sometimes it actually never gets to any sort of implementation because you have changes in administration, or you have, change of funding streams, and it just never gets prioritized. So this is something that the town board thought was very important, as well as the comprehensive plan steering committee, and it's part of this process.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Eileen Nadelson? And does anyone in the room here want to sign up for public comment?
I'm gonna say something real quick. I just need some clarification because
Sure.
I'm getting the general picture. This is a huge plan. I mean, it's a huge comprehensive
It
plan.
is.
And the ultimate decision will be done by the town board, correct?
Well, so ultimately with the comprehensive plan and the goals and objectives, there's a lot of policies. Sorry. There's a lot of policies, there's a lot of projects, and then there's also suggested regulations that for the town board to consider implementing. So ultimately, yes, the town board will be overseeing the implementation of any policies, projects, as well as regulations.
Okay, so I just like a full picture in my head. I'm getting that we suggest what we like, and I know there's 5
Yes.
hamlets here. So each hamlet's going to suggest what they like. And the town board will then pick and choose, I presume, the ones that they think will work the best for the entire location. Yeah, am I still on the same track or what?
So the comprehensive plan, actually, it doesn't necessarily, the comprehensive plan already identifies what we heard throughout the public comment, right? And there are some specific hamlet area, recommendations in terms of specific roadways or specific, there's also a lot of, if you believe it or not, a lot of people from all hamlets said, we want to travel along the New York State road, right? So every New York State road ended up in the comprehensive plan because that is what every area specifically identified. So there was a lot of-
Valerie, can we pause for just a second? There's some feedback on your mic that it's hard to hear you.
Oh, I think they were, oh, hold on.
Yeah, it's still happening.
Okay.
Okay, we'll just pause for a second.
How's this, better?
Much better.
Okay, so there are a lot of goals and recommendations. While it might sound general, it really it can be applied to every hamlet because that's what we heard from every hamlet. Every hamlet had concerns with how the beautification. Every hamlet area also had concerns about lighting, landscaping. They had concerns about their own businesses in their downtown hamlets, or connecting how to get to the downtown or the hamlet center businesses. So these are things that were very, very common throughout all the hamlet areas. But if you live in a particular hamlet, you might not realize that Walkabuck and Vista had the same concerns.
Okay.
But that being said, ultimately, in terms of the actual implementation, the town board will decide, each year which projects or which policies or which programs that they're going to implement.
Okay, so my next question, I have the picture now, that the end result is going to be from our town board.
Yes.
But in the result, or in the circumstance that the town board may change, is this locked in place? Is the comprehensive plan like a plan for this is 5 years, we do this is 7 years, we do that. And there might be changes on the board. Does that stay in place, or is it a variable with the change in?
Right, so that's a good question. So the goals and recommendations, while they might identify, for example, we were talking about shared use paths, right? And while it might identify a particular shared use path, and ultimately, you know, if there is, let's just say, a complete change in administration, right? That another administration comes in, they might still look at a shared use path, but it could be a different shared use path, right? But it still would be consistent with the comprehensive plan. Or what if for some reason that particular hamlet area where the shared use path was going to go decided they would prefer it actually to go in a different location, right? So a lot of the goals and objectives are written to some extent. There is some specificity, but they are a little bit more generalized and create a framework so that it's not just, you're not just looking at it from today, but that it could be adjusted as you move through the future.
And it's also contingent upon monetary availability.
Yes, exactly. But that being said, if for some reason, like a new administration comes in and says, we're never going to we're not going to do any shared use paths, and instead we're going to make it all auto-centric, right? And like go a complete 180, that would not be consistent with your comprehensive plan, right? And so therefore the town board would have a problem with that, because part of town law is to say that your goals and objectives, like any land use regulations policy, should be inconsistent with your
Is
comprehensive
there any
plan.
shifting of funds? Like you decide you're going to do something in transportation, let's say, but then you can't afford that. You rather want to do something-
That's a town board decision, not a comprehensive plan decision.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I mean, the next step is a lawsuit after the town board ignores.
No, and truthfully, I've worked no, it's not necessarily like in other communities. I'm sorry.
Repeat the question. We can't hear.
Sure. There was a question whether that the next step is a lawsuit. In all reality, I've worked in other communities where somebody is proposing like a particular development that's really, really against, like, counter to a comprehensive plan. And if a community does move forward with it, there are sometimes lawsuits saying it's not consistent with the comprehensive plan. But there's a caveat there, because New York state law allows for towns and communities, if circumstances change, to amend their comprehensive plan to reflect whatever changes are taking place. And so you can amend your comprehensive plan to deal with whatever issue or something like that that is maybe not identified in your comprehensive plan. So if your last comprehensive plan was in the 1980s, so theoretically, probably there were a number of issues that the town board dealt with that were not identified in your initial comprehensive plan. So, so those things evolve over time, and that's why you want to be able to amend your comprehensive plans. And then, but this does create an overall framework for which to move forward. And I think you'll find that most communities use that framework and move forward. And it's not till like a comprehensive plan becomes 10, 15 years old that they start seeing that things start shifting, or maybe new, like, for example, EV charging stations. We talk about it now, but we didn't talk about it 15 years ago, right? So that's where you want to be able to amend your comprehensive plans and let them evolve over time.
If we go to Carol Kemelgore. Carol, are you there?
Okay, am I unmuted?
You are.
Oh, good. Thank you. Where to begin? As Katie knows, my greatest concern, although everything that has been put into this comprehensive plan is really laudable, my question has to do with the lighting issue, which is 8.6. And I know that some of the points regarding lighting was taken out of the dark skies law, which I understand the New York state law will go into effect as of January 1st, 2025. I'm concerned about implementation of the new lighting laws or codes, I guess they're codes. If I assume it's the planning board who would be in charge of implementing the code. However, if it is not, if the planning board does not assume that responsibility because it's a state law, would then there be another method by which the lighting law would be, what would be the word? That the lighting law would be put into effect if there was somebody who was not abiding by the new code?
So I'm not familiar with the New York State law. I haven't seen drafts of that yet, but we are proposing to have some new lighting regulations. Typically, when you adopt new regulations, and this usually happens when state law comes into play, it's new projects moving forward. It's not going through house by house to make sure that you're up to standard. So it's new projects to move forward or new construction. But then would be the new construction or new projects that come forward, the building department or the planning board would be reviewing those types of applications and would make sure that new lighting adheres to whatever regulations are put into place.
So in other words, what you're saying is that if somebody is not abiding by the codes as the comprehensive plan has recreated them appropriately, redone the codes, 8.6 is, and I understand what you're saying, that it would be for new builds. But however, if somebody who has recently moved into Lewisboro and does not have the values regarding nature, wildlife, sustainability, etc., and is not abiding by these codes, then it is a dead deal. It has nothing to do with anybody who has previously lived here.
No, so let me just clarify. If there is a nuisance or something taking place that violates a code, that's when the building inspector or, code enforcement would get involved. This is really, I think the original question was who oversees the implementation of that, and that would be the planning board. But if for some reason somebody moves into a house and decides to put floodlights up in their backyard and now becomes problematic for the neighbors, that would be something the code enforcement would deal with.
And that would be the planning board?
No, the building department.
The building department. And if the building department doesn't act on it, then what recourse is there?
Well, there's always violations could be issued. And I'm sure if you have more questions on the town's process, Kirsten can always provide you some additional information, and I'm sure the building department can as well.
Can I ask one other question regarding this? And I'm sorry, I'm late to the party, so I don't know. I don't know how these different ideas were reached. I know some of the ideas come out of Dark Skies. Were any of the neighboring towns who have instituted new lighting codes, were their new codes looked to for ideas and?
Yes. Yes, we looked at a lot of neighboring communities, and we worked with the zoning committee to identify what they thought would be best for the town of Lewisboro.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So, I'm Catherine from Elmwood Road. I didn't want to be redundant concerning the goals about path, but with such a beautiful word as walkability that Peter mentioned, I thought I would reinforce the need for the path when some of your goals are to unite two goals you have one that for maintenance of public paths, I think. Well, maintenance of what path? But I don't see any path, but I'd like to merge this with the goal that says improve the safety of the community, because one goes with the other. If you drive or walk on certain roads, and selfishly, I have to say Elmwood Road, because that's my road, there are more and more young people moving into the neighborhood and babies with strollers. I have probably almost killed 2 or 3 because of the curves and the bumps, and also almost got killed myself for speeding people. So yes, you see more police controlling the speed, but I think it would be wonderful in the future, midterm or certainly not long term, but to build paths for the enjoyment of walking. You can tell I don't walk that much, and also for the safety, mostly the safety of the people.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
We're gonna go to, is this Marianne Lansdale or John?
No, it's actually Mary Ann.
Go
Hi,
ahead.
thank you for taking my hand. So as part of your transportation part with the trains, I think you might have, and I'm Vista proud, I should start with that. I think you neglected the New Canaan train station, because that is 10 minutes from my door. And it's not in, I didn't see it in there. I saw Golden's Bridge in Bedford. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, we can, that is correct. Those were the 2 that we highlighted in there, but we can always take a look at that train station.
Yeah, because I think it's heavily used by a lot of people on
Okay.
this, in this section of town, like at the bottom, the upside down L. The other thing is with wetlands, I know that you address wetlands, but as a person who is very concerned about the invasives that are taking over and killing all of our native species, how do we address that in wetlands? How can we encourage removal of invasives and letting people go into wetlands and try to bring back some of the natives? Do you address that part in here at all?
So we do talk about landscaping and native landscaping, and your zoning, some of the proposed zoning changes focuses on native landscaping, because that is something that was identified as an issue in terms of invasive species. In terms of like actually going into wetlands and removing invasive species, that is something that, you know, technically the town, you know, you could do now, depending upon the ownership of the parks, and, you know, and I think in terms of like pulling a wetlands permit or something like that, that would be something that you would just need to touch base with the planning department about, and they would be able to assist you in what you would be able to do, because I think there is some exceptions for maintenance and stuff like that in wetland areas.
Okay, because we did actually do that at the Vista Park, but volunteers went in and we did a whole lot of, I sawed a whole lot of burning bushes, and we had to sort of stop and desist with that. And I just want to make sure that we are actually protecting our wetlands by bringing natives back.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The native issue was identified as something that's important in the comprehensive plan.
And the other thing, and this might be in your website, and I apologize if it is, I know, so we had a plan back in the 1980s, which was quite a while ago. We were actually living here at the time, but do we know, like, what, if we want to learn from history, then what was done from that plan that makes our life here in 2024 better, so that we can make sure going forward that this plan is going to make somebody's life better 20 years from now?
So that's a good question. We did like a look at the goals and objectives in the original comprehensive plan, and that's actually in the inventory and analysis. And we kept items from the original comprehensive plan, like your special character overlays, and continued moving them forward. So where things worked, we continued to build upon those, and where things evolved or shifted, we created new goals and objectives.
Okay, but so just to piggyback on that, were there things that from that 1980s objective, the comprehensive plan, is that, oh, we really got it right? Or are there things we kind of messed up? Like, do we?
I think it's more of where, when you look at an older comprehensive plan, it's what did you get right and what should you continue building upon? And that was like, there was a lot of focus on the hamlet centers, and it was also focused on special character overlays. So there was a lot of specifics in the original comprehensive plan that you built upon, and now we're building on top of that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then my last thing, just to piggyback, walking Route 123 from New Canaan Line up to Onatru would be very nice to have in this neck of the woods. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Carol Cernak, could you unmute?
Hi, Carol Cernak, South Salem, New York. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes.
Okay, so first I would like to talk about the walkability path. It's, most people move here and live here for decades, not looking for a walkability or a bicycle or a walkway path. So I think that's already been voted down, so I'm not sure this is already why this is already in the this plan. It's unrealistic. Most of our roads are state roads. If you want to walk on town roads, walk at your own risk. I can't imagine putting a baby in a stroller or a child on a three-wheeler and sending them down a state road. It's just not necessary. It's not what our town is about. The other thing I'd like to talk about is native species, which has been brought up. I'm not sure why this was brought up, but let's look at our woodlands and look how many vines and invasive species that are interfering with our woodlands. And why are we not talking about that? So I'm not sure about what that conversation is about. The other thing is about school tax. Anybody who's lived here for 50 years and has put their kids through the John Jay School District should not retire here and continue to pay high school taxes. It's just not fair. It's not right. And most people that move here, they educate their children and they move out. So there should be an incentive for people that stay because they love the community. The other thing I'd like to talk about is how many people participated in this survey out of a ratio. How many people contributed as opposed to the ratio of residents? From what I'm understanding, there's only 622 people. And I'm also wondering how many of those people are redundant from meeting to meeting and conversation to conversation. So I'm not sure that this resolution should be put forward to the town board for approval or denial based on that low number. I appreciate everything the steering committee did, but I don't think it's a high enough number. The other thing I want to talk about is the view shed. It was mentioned briefly in the steering committee. What is a view shed? Is a view shed, from here to Pound Ridge Reservation? Is it from here to, Ridgefield? What's the view shed? And the other thing I'd like to mention is cell towers and how that interferes with the view shed. At Farview Farm, we have 2 cell towers one on the east and one on the west. And you're talking about putting another cell tower for communications at the Salt Dome property. So I'd like to have clarification about that.
Thank you. So I think just in terms of I think it's appropriate to talk a little bit about the comprehensive plan outreach process, because I think it's I will say that this town has done an outstanding job in terms of the outreach.
But if you say that there's 10,000 people that live in this town, and only 620 people have responded,
right. And so I'm going to explain a little bit about what you tend to typically find in these types of outreach processes. So what you'll find is if you have something extremely controversial, you will have 10,000 people out for something. But what you find is that when you have a transparent process like this one, where all the documents are available online, all the public recordings are available online, people will participate, but they participate differently throughout the process. We did have a lot of people reviewing the videos, emailing Kirsten at the steering committee email, asking very specific questions or sending some information in. We also had other different community organizations involved. So while it might not have been everybody that was represented at a community organization showing up to a meeting, it was the organization showing up to the meeting. We also met with all the town's committees and advisory groups, and they also had different connections throughout the town. So while we have, so having 600 and some odd people participate throughout the process is actually a pretty good number, because I've worked in some communities where you even have less than that participating throughout the process. But you will find that, throughout the process, there's been a lot of opportunities to participate. And when you do have those situations take place, you sometimes find that there, at times in certain public meetings, you don't have as large of a crowd because people have already gotten their voices heard or have already gotten the information that they're looking for through other sources. So, and we'll look into your other comments that you had in the comprehensive plan as well. Thank you.
Before we go to Luke Connolly, anybody in the meeting room want to sign up? Okay, Luke, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Yeah, thank you. I'll try to keep it quick. I'm just curious about the infrastructure planning in terms of roads. It's kind of a personal issue just because I live on a dirt road, and I was wondering if, I looked through the overall vision and things, but I wasn't sure if there were any concrete plans to make any adjustments to roads, particularly to paving.
So I think in terms of the paving,
cut me off.
We heard a combination between people really liking their dirt roads, and then we also talked to the highway department, and they said, again, of course, it's all about funding, but they're not opposed to paving the dirt road. So it really comes down to what the town or the community wants in terms of the dirt roads, which is why it didn't make it into the comprehensive plan, because there wasn't necessarily a direction one way or the other. It's pretty flexible, I think, at this point. Right. And I don't know, the town, Andrea or any of the town board members wanted to, right. Would you agree with that? My response?
That live in our town that feel very, very strongly that they want to keep their dirt.
Right, dirt roads, yeah.
They moved to their house because the dirt road, and they just absolutely.
Right, that's what we heard too.
There are other people that can't wait to have their road paved. We have a combination where the residents may love the road, but there was one particular road that was dangerous. And was very difficult to plow.
Right.
And were maintained because of, the incline and the curve on it. And that was a different type of situation. But from my experience, at least in the time that I've lived here and on my time, serving the community, where the community came out and said, no, we don't want our road paved. The town is like,
right, exactly. And that's why it really did not specifically get focused in the comprehensive plan, but it does. We do mention the number, I think it's 11 miles of dirt roads that you have within the town, and that's identified in the comprehensive plan.
William Strauss?
Hi,
this, by definition, this is a Lewisboro centric plan. So my question is just asking you to, if you could comment on how it relates, how this relates to the other towns around, and whether this plan is actually, you know, because you haven't said anything about it, how this plan would relate or does relate to the other towns, because I think it's hard to know. We live in Lewisboro, but
Right.
unless you really look at a map, most people would not know what actually is Lewisboro, like when you're in Pound Ridge or when you're in Bedford or when you're in Lewisboro. So, and this plan seems to be relating to just Lewisboro, where the issue is actually, some of these issues are actually probably bigger than just Lewisboro. So
No, and that's a good point. So a comprehensive plan by town law is supposed to be that town centric, right? But what we did try to identify is where there were regional issues. We tried to bring those regional issues in, or where Lewisboro was part of like a regional consortium, or for example, like the New York City Department of Environmental Protection is in the water resources is a more regional thing. So that's where we identified where the regional regulations would come into play, or housing is a more regional thing, or infrastructure in terms of like alternative energies or resiliency, or like the Westchester County Hazard Mitigation Plan, which Lewisboro was part of. So where there is larger plans or programs that Lewisboro is part of, we did identify those in the comprehensive plan, but the goals and objectives really focus on what Lewisboro has the power to do. But there are times in the goals and objectives where we do identify, like continue working with Westchester County or petition New York State DOT to try to move forward some of those regional issues. But you are correct, it is more of a town-centered focus. But we did make sure that we looked at what's taking place in the other communities to make sure that whatever we're proposing is not like inherently, you know, opposite of where a direction a particular other town is going. You're welcome.
Dean Travelino? Dean, are you there? Dean,
Can you hear me?
we can.
Oh, great. I was trying to unmute. My name is Dean Travelino. I live in the hamlet of South Salem, which is sort of in the middle, and we've heard a lot about Vista and Gold's Bridge, but we're also here also. I'm very impressed with the presentation so far. I feel like the comments I made in the survey way back when, some of them have been really listened to. As certified member of the senior citizens class, I really support the idea of extending some public transportation through the town, not just for the commuters and senior citizens, but for also all the support personnel that come and help people like me in their homes. Oftentimes, the cost of transportation is as big a factor as the cost of housing. I also support the floating zone for senior housing, but I also think we might also look at floating zones in a wider perspective, especially when you look at neighboring towns all over the county that are providing housing, and you know, affordable housing in an area where houses average $600,000 or more is a very interesting word. And you notice that all over the county, even in the northern Westchester, we see projects which are located usually near the train stations, because that's a reality, that actually provide senior housing or affordable housing, AFFH housing, alongside of housing for the young professional staff or young professional class, let's say, of workers. And they bring in money and they bring in customers that help out businesses. So, you know, just like way back in 1980s, we thought that office buildings would be great. And answer Mrs. Lansdale, we thought, or whoever asked that question, we thought office buildings were great in 1980 along the 684 corridor. That really didn't work out. So we have to look ahead of what we need now. We need all kinds of housing. But so I think you're on the right track, but maybe look at expanding it. But just one other thing specifically, in terms of expanding our housing. I'm a little worried. I didn't see in the, what I read it very quickly. And it's all broken up. When you look at it online as far as the zoning code. And I would appreciate, like some people said, some kind of red line or some kind of summary of what all of the differences are. But I was a little bit wary of what are the provisions. I understand what you're doing for accessory buildings or structures, but what about accessory apartments inside of houses? The town board stripped away a special permit requirement other than from the building inspector, which sort of bothered me. And now I see that there's an automatic special permit for turning a home into a four dwelling, multiple dwelling. And anything like that, what I'm worried about is a balance between the idea of light pollution and parking and all these things in our current law and in most towns from here, going back from the beginning of time. You require a homeowner to live in the property in a residential zone as a like sort of you watch over your own property. When you start putting in 4 dwelling units in the middle of a residential zone, when you start allowing accessory apartments without special permits, it's going to come up against, there's enforcement and there's rules. And if you have crazy rules or if you have a lot of rules, you're not going to be able to enforce. And like coming back for special permit every 2 years, requiring a homeowner to live in their house and not just, unless I'm wrong, the way I read it, a special permit, you can convert a single family house into 4 dwellings. So that's my concern. And one last thing is, as a few people said, before this goes to the town board, maybe it needs a little bit, I think 3 people said this, a little more input from the consumers, the business owners, the lawyers and engineers and builders that have to apply for these permits that take 5 years. And when the case of homes, add a tremendous amount to the cost of housing. So maybe some kind of a way of outreach to the consumers or to the, what do they call it, so fancy word, to the, I forgot what it is, but people who use the product might be helpful and taking too much time. So thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. Just for clarification, in terms of the accessory residence dwellings, the accessory apartments, we're not proposing anything differently than what's already there in your zoning. We felt that your accessory apartment law right now is adequate and has been, I believe, updated more recently. And so it does meet some of the best practices that are being proposed. In terms of any sort of special permit with 4 dwelling units per acre, we're not proposing anything for the residential districts. The only thing that we're proposing that we talked about tonight was the senior housing overlay, which is proposed to have 4 dwelling units per acre. But that, again, that would require 15 acres and it would require a town board approval. But we'll look into those other items that you mentioned as well. So thank you.
Right, just a quick question. I know,
Sure.
thank you for allowing me to ask this really quick. And Mary Ann had brought this up and it made me think of it. What I'm seeing is, this broad, feeling of wanting to maintain the environment, right? So, which is what's so amazing about our town, and encouraging stewardship in this plan. And if you could point to the code for me, if you came across this, you have such a great.
You want to talk?
Is there anything in the code that speaks to not allowing people or making people mow their lawns? So those kinds of things that are now being looked at as an environmental thing where no mow areas are encouraged, but is there any restrictions in the code not allowing people to?
I did not see any restrictions. I mean, sometimes there is property maintenance requirements, but the property maintenance is different and building inspectors can interpret that as they see fit, right? There's a difference between property maintenance versus no mow may.
Yeah.
So, yes, no mow may is permitted in the town.
Or I mean, even broader, we're trying to expand on that and, not mow at all almost. So that's where I'm just,
right. And I think, and I think for the most part, there's nothing that prohibits you know, the natural evolution of a particular landscape in the town of Lewisboro.
Okay, okay.
Yeah,
Thank
you're
you.
welcome.
Barbara Mangione.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. So I just wanted to mention something. I live in the hamlet of Golden's Bridge. I was born in the Bronx, raised in the Bronx, and had my first house in the Bronx. I moved up here for several reasons. I had a young family, so the school system, open space, the character of the area. And when I've been following the master plan since its inception, all the work. My concern is there's some goals in there which I feel are in direct contrast to preserving the character of Golden's Bridge. And I think sometimes you have to tweak some of these things based on the geographic area. For example, some of the things you spoke about were apartment dwellings over buildings, like say, for example, in the shopping center. Accessory units on property, and you gave us a ratio of how that would work. When I moved up here, Michelle Estates was still being built, Arbor Hills was still being built. Brady Farm wasn't even in existence. Neither was Falcon Ridge or Lewisboro Commons. So what I'm trying to say is Golden's Bridge is probably one of the most densely populated hamlets in the town of Lewisboro. And some of these goals that you're trying to incorporate into this master plan are really going to be detrimental to the area rather than helpful. I think somebody should be looking at this and saying, we have a certain density here, we have a certain amount of land per house or acreage. We may not be able to use the same formula for accessory buildings or accessory apartments in this area of town, because a lot of it will drain the infrastructure. Increase Miller Elementary School was always one of the most populated elementary schools. And even right now, when enrollment is down across the district, Increase Miller enrollment is still pretty high, has been going steadily up, especially with new families moving in. When you're talking about Golden's Bridge proper, which is the area right around the train station, if all you have to do is drive through it during rush hour to see that the road infrastructure cannot handle the traffic. You have to worry about the well system for all additional housing that you may want to put there or even in the shopping areas. You have to worry about your fire departments who have to respond to so many more housing. And for some people who don't know, a fire department will respond very differently to a call at a freestanding individual house than it will, for example, to say Lewisboro Common, where there's a building with multiple units in it. They'd have to send many more people out. And most people up here know that our fire departments are hurting. They need volunteers. So in a nutshell, what I'm trying to say is some of these goals that are enclosed within the master plan may have to be tailored to the individual hamlets so that you're not ruining the character and you're not strapping the infrastructure. Thank you very much for all your work.
Hey, thank you. So just for clarification, I understand. I mean, that was one of the things that we heard loud and clear, that there was concern that a lot of development is being focused on certain areas of the town. So one of the things that we looked at was trying to make sure that we did not ultimately end up with a plan that continued furthering that situation. So what we looked at specifically is the accessory apartments that we're referring to is something that you already have adopted and it's already allowed in Golden's Bridge. And so we're not suggesting any inherent changes to the accessory apartments law. With the accessory dwelling units, when we talked about reducing it from 20-acre minimum down, we specifically focused on the underlining zoning districts. So that way it would specifically, for each hamlet area, it would follow the zoning districts within that hamlet area and not necessarily create something new that would be universal throughout, applied to all the hamlets and only one particular standard. In addition, with the commercial businesses and the mixed use, it's already permitted in the commercial businesses districts in the Golden's Bridge area. So we're not suggesting creating this as a new zoning amendment. We're just identifying that it's already permitted in those areas. And we were just suggesting some of the minimum acreage better reflect like what you typically find in a mixed use area in terms of minimum acreage to be able to put a dwelling unit. But no matter what, with any development process that you go through, it does require you to look at what they call the environmental impacts of a development. And so it does look at whether you have water and sewer capabilities. It does look at things in terms of traffic, as well as fire departments and community response services. And we did reach out to the fire departments and spoke to each one of them and asked them what their concerns were, especially dealing with any times of long-term development. And we did receive those responses, and that was part of the inventory analysis, and then also taken into consideration as we looked at the comprehensive plan. So, but thank you for your comments, and we'll definitely continue looking at this in more detail as we continue through the process.
We're going to the Farmer's Grind.
Hello. Can you hear me?
And
hi there. All right, my name is Michelle. I am one of the owners of the Farmer's Grind, as well as a member of the Vista Hamlet. So there are a couple of things. I think my first question is, we're all seeing all these, we're giving these suggestions for how to, like, how is this action plan and about this draft, and how are we going to make the changes that I guess the people of the hamlets are proposing. For example, we talk about the bike lane and the pedestrian walkway section, but changing that wordage to being shared use path instead. How do we see the actions that, I guess what I'm trying to say is from what we're giving you, how does that come up? Because really, one of my biggest focuses is representing Vista, and I love our hamlet so much. And I moved here 5 years ago, my husband and I, and we came here for the nature and the beauty, but also to have accessibility and walkability. And the idea of having a path and having something that connects the hamlet, I think will just better our hamlet. And now there was one woman who talked about the bond and how saying it was done and over. And I don't think that's necessarily true at all. I think that vote lost by it was a very close vote. And just because the bond didn't go through doesn't mean that the path isn't going to actually happen. I think there's enough of people in our hamlet and maybe other hamlets who want the same thing for their own hamlets to connect, that we can get it done without the bond. So I want to make sure that our wordage is correct in representing who we are as a hamlet, and that we want something that's a shared use path and using the right words so we can get what we want accomplished in our hamlet.
Yes, absolutely. We're going to look at that again.
So is it something as just like rewriting, like you do another draft and then you?
Right. It'll be actually tweaking a couple of the goals that specifically refer to that. We didn't refer to it as a shared use path, but we did refer to it in the comprehensive plan. So we'll just tweak the language of that particular specific path that we were referring to.
Okay. All right. And then,
Hello?
sorry, my husband's also here.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hey, how are you? Eric Smith. As my wife mentioned, we moved in 5 years ago. We chose this area because of the dream we had of raising our kids in a place like this. We would love our kids to run around in the woods and bike with friends and not come home till the bell rings, the thing everybody kind of dreams about. And I think Lewisboro does a great job of offering that. But again, regarding the shared youth path, not just with my kids I don't have kids yet, but anyone's kids, we have a couple customers at the Farmer's Grind that I know they take their disabled children on walks daily. And there's no place to go. I mean, they walk the same street every day, and why not be able to take a child up 123 on a nice shared youth path to go grab ice cream or to grab a slice of pizza. On East Street alone, there are 5 firemen, myself included, that work for the FDNY. A couple of them are retired. The retired guys that I know were on the job for 9/11. And I know the Vista Fire Department has an incredible memorial for the 9/11 attacks that had happened. And I mean, just that alone, being able to walk there, memorialize it, on the day. You know, there's a lot of firemen that are littered throughout Lewisboro and Vista in general. And I just think there's so many benefits to this shared use path. And I'm sorry, I can only focus on what was her name? Carol's comments. So yeah, I know, although maybe one or a couple people may not want it, especially people that don't even live in this hamlet.
Well, just for clarification, no, we're not saying we're not going to have the shared use path in the.
Oh, I understand that completely. I understand that completely.
It was in the plan. We were asked to tweak it in terms of how we're referring to it. Other than that, it's remaining in the plan and it will continue moving forward in the plan.
Okay, that is excellent. Yeah, I like I said, I think it has many benefits. And I think everyone can benefit from it. Again, just being able to use trails and go to Onatru and watch their kids' games, etc. So appreciate you letting me speak on this.
Great, thank you.
Checking in, any more questions from the room? All right, Carol Cernak, could you unmute, please?
Yeah, it's Carol Cernak again. I don't appreciate being cut off without any answers to my 6 questions. 123 has been notoriously bad for driving accidents, fatal driving accidents. And like I said before, I'm not sure why you would want to put your child or your baby in a walker and send them down that road. There's people on this discussion that could speak to that. The other thing that you did not discuss is the view shed that everybody wants to keep and maintain, and the communications, which involves the cell tower at the Salt Dome project. So I'm not sure why you cut me off and did not respond to my questions like everybody else.
I apologize. So in terms of the walking along, that's why we have a lot of language in the comprehensive plan that speaks to potentially looking at developing the ability to have shared use paths, or also walking along, putting in sidewalks, crosswalks, appropriate safety to allow for pedestrian accessibility during the state roads. I understand that you have concerns with allowing people to do that, but if it's done appropriately and safely, people can use those roadways. In terms of the view sheds, we didn't have specific view sheds identified in the comprehensive plan. We had scenic corridors that are already identified as part of your special character overlays. So we can take a look to see if there's any particular view sheds that have been mentioned in the past. And then I think the last question you had related to cell towers, and really the focus of the comprehensive plan has been looking at wireless communications, but I am not aware of this particular cell tower project you're referring to.
I find that hard to believe, as a cell tower conversation at the Salt Dome project has been in existence for 5 or 6 years. So to say that you're not aware of it and it's not in the comprehensive plan is disjustice to the town and to the residents who surround the property.
Right, so we'll look into that a little bit more.
Okay, but I don't understand why it's just now coming to light. It's been the subject of conversation for many, many years. It goes between the highway garage at Lake Truesdale to the Salt Dome project to the church, the steeple at the church. How could you not be aware of those conversations?
You know what, I apologize. It's just something that we probably overlooked. So we'll look into it a little bit more.
Okay, and I guess you overlooked all my other questions, but I thank you for responding to those. You're
Okay,
welcome.
I just want to jump in here as well. This is Katie. So one thing I want to highlight, because we have gotten this question a couple times, is that the comprehensive plan process is separate and distinct from town board meetings. So we set up this process so that we could collect feedback in a wide-ranging and inclusive way from all of town, community members, stakeholders, But we did that separate from town board meetings. So if you have issues that you've brought up at past town board meetings, but you haven't brought them up as part of this process, tonight's a great time to do that. You can also send us emails. And as we've mentioned, this is the draft plan, and it needs to be further revised before it's marked final draft. So
Okay, and I appreciate that, but I would also like an answer to my question about how many people participated in each hamlet as opposed to how many people live in the town. That's not an unreasonable question. It's a fact.
Sure. So I can address that as well. Throughout this process, and Valerie spoke a little bit to this earlier, on how much time and effort this steering committee and our over 100 volunteers in our outreach teams.
I appreciate what you've done, but I want to know what the participation is.
Yes, I will answer your question. So the thing I want to highlight is that what we can control is the advertising and the community engagement that we have done. But what we can't control is the actual number of people that come out and participate. And Valerie spoke to that. Often people come out and participate when there's something really controversial on the table. And this whole time, it's a multi-year process. It's been super transparent. I don't think we've encountered a lot of those really controversial topics that people have felt like they needed to come out and participate necessarily. So Valerie, I know we have some statistics about households and how this compares to other towns. That's available on our website. I can go ahead and make sure that Carol, you receive that directly.
Yeah. I appreciate that. And the other thing I'd like to know is why I was cut off.
That was me, Carol. That was me behind the scenes. I thought that it was important that Valerie be able to finish talking before she was interrupted, and so I muted you, but I did make sure to chat you and encourage you to raise your hand again so that we could finish the conversation.
Yeah, I don't see it that way, but thank you. I appreciate all your effort. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to move to Jason Beckman.
Hi, it's Barbara Beckman. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
So someone had mentioned earlier, the bond that failed by a close margin. I'm from Cross River, so we had a stake in it too. But, because I was aware of this whole effort with the plan, it was very hard for me to understand, like piecemeal, while that bond was coming up and how that fit into the priorities that would be, that the plan was trying to address. And in fact, it sort of sounded very loose, like Cross River would get a certain amount of money to do what it wanted with respect to sidewalks or bike safety, et cetera. So I'm just hoping that going forward, there's going to be some better communication if bonds, they're going to cost everybody money, how it fits into the plan and what is the project per se that we're trying to address. So it's just kind of a general comment, the bond has happened. I don't know if it'll be revisited, but that was my reaction. Even though I want to see sidewalks put in certain places in Cross River, I just felt very uncomfortable, quite frankly, with the way it was just launched when we hadn't finished our comprehensive plan and with no tie-in to what exactly was the project we would be funding.
Okay, so so the comprehensive plan really doesn't focus on actual bonds themselves, right? That's something that clearly that's the way of the town would identify or be able to make funds available for projects. But what it does do is it does specifically encourage the town to look at accessibility, walkability, and looking at those particular projects. So in the future, the town board would have the comprehensive plan in which the framework would be there to support those types of projects.
Yeah, I guess maybe the feedback to the town board is they'll just need to sort of connect it to this so we understand which goal they're trying to address here and what we'd actually be getting if we raised money for it,
Yep, no, absolutely.
We're listening.
Yeah, they're here.
That's all right.
Andrea Renda and Dan Welsh, we're from the town board, we're here and listening.
Good, thank you.
We have 3 more people on Zoom. Anyone in the room want to comment or offer a question? Okay. We're going to go to Mickey DiNicola, please.
Hi, Mickey Danicola, Golden's Bridge. I don't see anything in this draft about a noise ordinance. There's a lighting ordinance, and I brought this up to the town board on several occasions in the past. The current master plan does not really have a specific noise ordinance. It's very loosely worded. So I would like to see you guys put something in here about that.
So that's a good question. The town does have a noise chapter in its town code. So there are,
Very loose, though, extremely loose.
so but if I think the comments we received focused on noise, really focused on some of the highways, specifically I-684. And that is something that, because it's a state-owned highway, is something that the town would have to work directly with New York State involving noise coming from that highway. So I don't know if that's what you're referring to, but a lot of Golden's Bridge residents had concerns with the noise from I-684.
Well, yes, I'm concerned with that, but I'm talking about property to property.
Sure.
There's no defining criteria. I've had instances where I was told to call the police. The police tell me to call the building department. The building department tells me to call the planning board. It's not, if you look at it, you'll see what I'm talking about. It's not specific.
Sure, we can take a look at that. And I understand that that's a concern that happens in some other communities, and we can look.
It's not just Golden's Bridge, but I have brought it up on multiple occasions, and I'm always told we're going to look into it. So this looks like the perfect time to look into it.
Sure, we can take a look at it.
Okay, thank you.
Paul Stievelman?
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Terrific, thank you. Longtime resident, love the town, have put kids through the school system here, have invested in my property. I want to make 3 comments. One about investment in properties and beautification of our properties, the other about connectivity, and the third about businesses. The first, I think people want to invest in their properties. They're proud of their properties. They enjoy living here. They want to live in a nice house, a nice property, and they want to take care of it. I want to understand what specific things we think are feasible to make it easier to invest in the property, because having gone through the process of home improvement, and others have said that it is quite a gauntlet to run in terms of expense and time to make basic improvements and sophisticated improvements to your house and your property. One thing is, when you start the process, it's almost incomprehensible to navigate the programs and committees and experts that you need to go from one step to another. I think something like a volunteer position of a resident advocate, or someone who can help navigate, who's been through the process and then can advocate for you with respect to some roadblocks, might be helpful. Because until I think we unlock the potential of investing in our own properties, we're chilling people's ability to invest and beautify. And of course, when people do invest and beautify their homes, it raises the value and the attractiveness of all of our homes, and that has economic consequences. So I do want to hear something about what you think tangibly can be done to make it easier for people to invest in their properties. Number 2, I don't agree with anything Carol Cernak said, and with respect to Vista and the shared use path. And the reason I say that is the town must have a connected character. What the town is missing is an identity, because it's so spread out. I drive to New Canaan or Pound Ridge to talk to people, to walk my dog, to socialize, to frequent businesses, and I don't want to do that. I think something that connects us and gives us the opportunity to congregate is great. And we can do that at the town pool, we can do that at the parks. But if we're too isolated within our business hamlets, and we don't have that connectivity and the option to walk and meet and greet, then in my opinion, I think we lose a very significant character and identity that we could grow. And so I'm 100% for walkability and something that would create a lifestyle where you could meet people and connect and congregate between and connecting the hamlet. So I think that is very important. And the third thing is businesses. If you look at the town and sustainability, I think we need, as you have said clearly, to grow the business base. But again, specifically, what do you think is feasible to do that, to make this a more attractive environment for businesses to thrive? Thank you. And I know that's a lot and you can't answer them all, but I did ask, those are 3 questions about investment in property, connectivity, and business. Thanks.
All right, so in terms of investment, I think one of the things that, we did try to, I think there's some text in the economic development chapter, but we'll double check to confirm this, but I do believe we talked a little bit about trying to provide like information for potential business owners on how to move through the approval process. So that's something that we can also identify as like part of like just in general in terms of like overall improvements to people's properties. And that's something that can be done in terms of just like, either having somebody as like a point person within the town or also developing some sort of like flow chart or information on how to get through the approval process. In terms of connectivity, I think there's a lot in the comprehensive plan in terms of connectivity. So, and we're not proposing to remove anything. And I think it was just, again, we were just going to tweak a couple things to make sure that it's reflected correctly. But in terms of businesses, we did try to identify working with in the economic development chapter under goals 4 and 5, working with the different businesses, looking at like district regulations to make sure that like, we're trying to remove any sort of obstacles, but I think some of it is also just helping to get people through the process and people understanding the process a little bit more as well in terms of getting their approvals. And some of it is trying to streamline some of that and make sure the information in the regulations reflects what's actually happening in practice.
Moving on to Liza Frazier.
Hi, am I unmuted?
You are, go ahead.
Oh, thanks. Full disclosure, I am Mrs. Dean. I'm married to Dean Travelino. So he's already spoken. So I hope I get a chance to speak too, even not just one per household. But I've been listening and I'm new to the project. We were out of it last year with some health issues, and I'm really impressed with all the work that's been done. I'm raising my hand because I agree that the lake communities and everything else are very special. I have a special interest in thinking that the horse community is special too. And I think that the idea that you can still have a horse in this town is pretty great. And I would like to keep that going in the plan going forward for the next 10 years or whatever, because it is very special. It's something that young kids, it's a great, being at the barn instead of being in a mall is one of the best things ever for young kids, and provides recreation opportunities, creates jobs, helps out with scholarships. If you're a riding person, you can get into a school and get on the horse team. Anyway, so I just, as we're going forward with this, the New York state law has ag and market things in there that express provide regulations to aid horse operations. And but I didn't see anything in here that helps out the small backyard farms that I think enhance our property values and contribute to our rural character. Just to keep in mind as we're going forward, I'd like to, as we're going forward and as you're drafting the land use rules, if you just keep sometimes there are unintended consequences, and just keep the horse community in mind. But I really appreciate all you've done, and just want to go on the record for that. I think it's incredible how much work has been done. It's really fun moving forward, and I look forward to how you guys are going to go on and do the next steps.
Great, thank you. You do have some horse regulations in your zoning, and we are proposing to keep those as is. So that's why you don't really see a lot, because we felt that the horse regulations right now do seem to be adequate for what's needed, but what we are doing is helping to tweak. So what we're calling like accessory add-ons, so that if for some reason a horse farm wants to have, like specifically that there is some language in there that you can have, that's where like some of the short-term rental stuff is going to come into play a little bit, and maybe also some of like bed and breakfast. And so there's other things that horse farms could potentially add on to help sustain them in the long run. And those are the things that we're looking at to help augment their business.
we'll go back to Dean.
Hope I'm not violating any rules, speaking twice. I just wanted, thanks for allowing me to, I just wanted to clarify something, about the corridor, the scenic corridor and the scenic, viewscape. The people who spoke about the scenic corridor were talking more in terms of improving, for example, the way it looks driving into Vista, and that would be a great idea. I'm totally in favor of that. The people that spoke own two of the most vibrant businesses in town. But I think also the plan was talking about to preserve corridors. And as part of preserving corridors, I think it should be opened up to also preserving viewscapes. In my years in town, the planning board, other people who opine on projects, viewscapes is always an important factor that comes in. And while you can't litigate each, the master plan can't determine where cell towers go, it could just put a recognition in about the importance of viewscapes, because, for example, what Carol Cernak is talking about is a proposed cell tower alongside of a nature preserve, the town cemetery, Echo Farm, a 200-something-year-old farm, and Farview Farm, another historic farm, which actually has some historic value as the home of Henry Wallace. So at some point, and the tower would be seen prominently from coming out of the townhouse and coming out of the library. So again, you can't say whether that's a good or bad project or whether it should go or not go, but I think the master plan could recognize what everyone seems to recognize, that, not just scenic corridors, but scenic viewscapes. And thanks, and you won't hear from me again tonight. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Mary Shaw.
Hey, Mary Shaw, council member and Vista resident. I want to thank everyone for making this gathering happen, and the volunteers of not just the steering committee for the comprehensive plan, but the other committees who helped with their input. It's the volunteers who make a difference, and I just wanted to express my gratitude and that I've been listening the whole time, and we take your comments and input seriously. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mary Ann Lansdale.
Yeah, can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Go ahead, John.
Talk.
Yeah,
There you
he's
go.
talking.
Yeah, I'm talking, sorry. I want to say one more thing too, about the corridor. A bunch of us are interested in this corridor. And the corridor is not so much an offensive thing as it's a defensive thing. Because if anybody has walked anywhere along Route 123 or Route 35 or a couple of other connecting routes, and this goes all the way over to the whole town has this. It's a major corridor. People are on the way from somewhere to somewhere else. It's almost it's like I-95 local roads. That's what it is. We really need to have some cleanup of our roads, like some telephone poles put under the ground, and to have speed limits changed and have some lanes widened. That's what it is. It's a defensive thing. Making it nicer with some signs and everything is a good idea, but that's sort of getting around the problem. It's just too much. And most of the traffic in our neighborhood on I 123 I see is from Connecticut. Like overwhelming amount is going to and from Connecticut. So it's an interstate thing. So anyway, something should be, and I agree. You're not in charge of making sidewalks or anything, or making it into that's a New York State problem and a town problem. But it should be a concern. What you can do is put in the plan. There's a concern that we're on a major highly traveled interstate corridor, and anything to ameliorate it as possible whenever there's a chance. And that's that's how I'll say it.
Yes, thank you. And it is in the plan. I would recommend looking at the transportation section, and there's a lot of information in there about the New York State roadways and trying to increase walkability, accessibility, and safety of those roadways.
Yeah, it was the point is that this road that goes through us is not a regular state road. It's a special state road, and cars go real fast on it, and they're trying to get places morning and rush hour. And it's a special problem, and we can't just it's not like a normal town where you go in and fix a few things up. It's it's a bad problem.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Last call, in person, over Zoom. Any other comments or questions?
All right.
I have
If
no
not-
raised hands.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for attending. We got a really robust showing both on Zoom and in person. So thank you, and stay tuned as this process continues. And if you have any questions or anything, please feel free to email. Kirsten, will you just say that email address one more time?
Steering.
Oh, there it is, right in front of me. Yes.
.com.
Steering@planlewisboro.com. Thank you.